Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to a very special Friday version. I always like the Friday versions. Friday version of the Rant, November 19th, 2021, the week before Thanksgiving. And the Arizona Fall League is coming to slowing down, coming to an end shortly. And our boy Nelson Velaquez is just kind of like out of nowhere. He's the 29th ranked prospect in the Cubs system. He's on the verge of winning the MVP, AFL MVP. And for those that don't know, the AFL is really kind of like, it's kind of like the all-star version of the minor league league, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. It's where you really got, if you can think of anybody who's really been successful in the major leagues, chances are they've played in the AFL. And so for a player to tear it up the way Nelson Velaquez is, he's currently slashing 385, 487, 12. He's second. His average is second. His on-base percentage is fourth. His slugging is second overall. And he's got the most at-bats of any batter in the AFL. To you, Evan, what are your thoughts on what Nelson Velaquez is doing? And should we get like super excited about this? Is this the guy that's going to be like an MVP in the major league level?
I don't know. I'm interested in, and I don't know if it was just mine. It sounded like your audio cut out briefly, and I think the final number on his slash line, his OPS is 1012. I'm sorry.
I was doing 712 was the slugging.
712.
Yeah,
okay, the 7. I didn't hear the 7.
OPS is 1.19.
That's what it is. Okay. So, So I mean, he's been incredible. I think there's a measure of different things involved here. And in general, the AFL does tend to be kind of a hitter's league. A lot of times, a lot of the pitchers who go there are making up for lost time naturally, right? Because you think, well, if you pitched an entire season, if you're a young pitcher and you've already pitched a full season, why would they send you immediately back out there to go get more? So a lot of those guys are on strict pitch counts. It's sort of like spring training and that they could be working on different things. So I don't want to like temper things immediately, but I do want to set the proper context, and I can actually delve into that a little bit further in a little bit. But what I like about it is he's being super aggressive. He's not letting the game come to him necessarily. He is going out and attacking, and that's what I love to see. 2 of the balls he hit last night, one of them I think was 111 off the bat, one was 107 in that neighborhood. Really clean bat path. He's still got some big swing and miss in his game. And I do think there's a potential, you're facing maybe a more of a normal situation. Those 2 strike counts could be a little bit tougher, but he's not really letting himself get into as many of those. And that's what I like to see. Really think the opportunity for him could be greater if, as we all assume, the DH is adopted in the National League, because, hey, there's an extra spot for a hitter. And he can certainly play the outfield, and he's perfectly fine out there. But just in terms of a guy like that who you say, man, this dude just mashes, and we want to get him to line up a little bit more frequently. I like it a lot. I like the quick bat. We've seen him hit some Oppo tacos on, there was one in particular that I saw. I think it was Lance Brosdowski from, and I'll probably butcher his name. I'll just pronounce it 15 different ways. No, I think it was Lance's video. Maybe it had to be. Anyway, that he showed, and it looked as if one of those where Velaquez had made his swing decision a little bit late and was still able to whip his bat through the zone and drive one 400 feet out to right center. As a right-handed hitter, right? So opposite field, tons of power, and it's not because he's a massive guy. It's just he's got really quick hands. His bat speed is incredible through the zone, and that'll help him make up for a lot of mistakes and catch up to velocity. I do think that, again, there's some work to be done. I think he's probably going to be spending some time in the minors again, get him in. I'd like to see him face AAA pitching with those guys who AA pitching in general is more talented. AAA pitching, you get a bunch of junk ballers. I mean, just because it'll be a bunch of those dudes who are kind of still hanging on and might be trying, like you will face a lot of junk. And that's what I'd like to see him kind of get after versus a lot of dudes who are maybe making up for that lost time and leaning more heavily on their fastball because that's what they're being told to do. So I don't want to downplay what he's doing. I think it's awesome and I love it, but I do think there's room for growth as we move forward.
You're putting some reality in there, which, I mean, let's face it. I mean, he played most of the year last year in Tennessee, but he started in South Bend and then played most of the season in Tennessee. And so this isn't an aberration. I mean, he was playing well in Tennessee, actually, the best he had played at any level up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's encouraging that he's played better at the higher levels that he's gone. And you see that sometimes with guys. You see it just sometimes guys they don't have the competitive fire. They just don't feel like they're being challenged in the lower leagues. And so a lot of times you don't get that same level of performance that you get out of guys. And so maybe he's one of those guys, but you mentioned the K rate. I mean, he's striking out over 30% K rate, which is high. And as you mentioned, where you've got pitchers who maybe
Teddy
it's not
is apparently really in need of some help there, huh?
He is. Teddy. Come here, Teddy. So I'm watching Teddy. This is Teddy, everybody. Hi. And he's hanging out. And but he's definitely has the swing and miss. And it's not great that he's got the swing and miss in the AFL, which is, as you mentioned, not necessarily your top pitching talent. And you're getting guys that are throwing a lot of fastballs.
Yeah, and it's I mean, hey, it's dry air, right? It is it's good for the ball to travel there, but I think and that's something that can he grow from that? Absolutely. But is there potential for that to be exposed even further? Absolutely on that as well. And but hey, if you look at it like a Patrick Wisdom-ish, Ian Happ-ish, look at guys who have a lot of pop. Obviously Wisdom, more on the pop side and even more on the swing and miss side too, is that you get the boom bust. But if you're able to offset that, we talked, I think it was on last week's show, a little bit about how, and I think you were a little concerned with the Cubs almost skewing a little further toward the contact side, and kind of the pendulum swinging. But if you balance that out, and you go, hey, super high contact rate with Frank Schwindel, and then you've got Patrick Wisdom, and then you've got Nicky Two Strikes Madrigal, and then you've got a Velasquez. If you balance, not that you want to go necessarily back and forth. I'm not advocating that would be your lineup necessarily, but if you have a balance in there so that then when he's up, he's able to do damage with runners on base, you're not really counting on him to be the guy that, makes that contact and flips a little oppo single over there to drive a runner in from second. That's probably not going to be much of his game. But, as long as the power continues to develop, you can live with a little bit more swing and miss. And that's what's got to happen, right? That power has got to continue to translate as he moves up and plays at those higher levels and gets into some of those ballparks where it's going to be cold. It's going to be humid. And the ball's not going to travel 400 feet in the nice clear desert air, that you're dealing with. So we'll see. But I mean, you have to love that he's done. I think initially there was a thought that like, oh shit, this might be, it was like a 1 week breakout. He hit a bunch of home runs, but like he's done it through the entire AFL season pretty consistently. And that I think is what's important.
Yeah. And I mean, it's how he handles success too, right? Because here's a guy who, maybe he had success when he was younger, but so far in the minors, you don't really, there's not a platform for success necessarily, but this is success. He's probably going to win the MVP. And it's like, what does he do next? And does he start back at Tennessee again? Hopefully that's where he starts.
At the very least. I mean, I think, it depends on how things maybe shake out. What happens with, he'll almost certainly be placed on the 40-man roster. Kind of depends on who else they sign, but again, I think he's going to probably get moved up to AAA, barring something happen, assuming we get a spring training. And I'm sure he'll be up, of course he'll be up with the big league team for their spring training. If he performs well there, I think we could very likely see him at AAA. Obviously, they got Brennan Davis as another very hot outfield prospect. What happens there? How do you get those guys going? I do think they are very close to Chicago, and I don't know that there's a whole lot else that he can really, like I said, there's no problem for him facing dudes who can throw gas. That I don't think is a concern at all. I would like to see him in the AAA level facing junk and facing guys who aren't going to throw him something to hit, who are going to intentionally work him away, sliders, off speed, curveballs.
Yeah.
And see how he handles that with a steady diet of just crap that's not going to be easy to drive necessarily. So, we'll see, but I think the potential exists. It's not uncommon in the least for somebody to make the jump from AA to the majors if the Cubs, do something different from what they said they're going to do, and they don't make the significant moves in free agency, and they've got some room up there. There's potential that we could see him up. But I think we'll see him. I think we'll see him at some point next year.
There's not a lot of players blocking his path to the majors. Let's put it that way. So if you're a minor leaguer, yeah, which honestly, he could just ride the bench. But if you're a minor leaguer in the Cubs system, you're feeling pretty good about your chances of being able to break into the majors if you're having a good season. That said, I don't think I've ever been more excited about spring training. I mean, God knows what's going to happen and when it's going to actually start. If it's going to start on time, we'll get into that in a minute. But when you look at spring training and you talk about some of the young guys, I mean, even looking at the guys like Patrick Wisdom and Frank Schwindel, it's going to be fun, dude. Spring training is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, especially if they actually sign some guys, if they're able to, depending on how that all works out.
Yeah.
And if whether they make a really big move or not. But I think also, seeing a lot of these pitchers, seeing a lot of the guys who came over in the trades that nobody's gotten a chance to see in a Cubs uniform, or very few, certainly those will be there at spring training, unless you made it to some South Bend games or Tennessee. And some of the pitchers, I think we could see, we've seen a little bit. We talked about Velasquez. We've seen the emergence of Caleb Killian, who I really, really, really liked when I saw that in the trade. Again, I always like to preface this. I don't like the idea that Chris Bryant was traded, as a general concept, right? But I think between Alexander Canario and Caleb Killian, you've got to be pretty excited about the return. And I'm still like, when I see Killian, when I see a dude who can hit 98, right? He can touch 98. He throws strikes like nobody's business. And once he got things figured out, there's another guy, right? Early on in the AFL, was working on a couple things, changed his curveball grip. He went to a spike curve instead of a more traditional curve, working on some things there, working on the change. And then they implemented the Major League Baseballs that are the pre-tacked baseballs. So they've got the tacky stuff already on them, which, in my understanding of that is that they're certainly not nearly as much as if a player were to doctor his own, use his own substance to doctor the ball. But you could see the immense change. So like Killian, I think, gave up 9 runs without, in like an inning. The second inning of which was just an appearance. He didn't actually even record an out. I think 7 runs without an out. But since then, it's something like, no runs on just a few hits, 18 strikeouts, no walks, something like that. And it's the no walks. The Cubs have been looking for the longest time for A, pitchers who can throw 95 plus, and B, pitchers who don't walk a lot of people.
Yeah.
And holy shit, they've got both of those in one guy that they picked up as part of a trade for a player who they were not going to re-sign. Again, looking at the, in a very objective standpoint from the Bryant thing. So I like Killian a lot. And here's an interesting fact for you. He is one of 2 pitchers named Caleb to be named AFL Pitcher of the Week at some point this year.
Very interesting.
The other
one, he's got. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was going to say the other one of whom is the son of my son's pitching coach.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's random. I was just talking to him about it last night. Anyway, carry on. That's actually has nothing to do with anything, but it is pretty neat that the guy I talked to him last night and his kids out there, he's like, I didn't even know he won it. Because it's just more of a, but this guy pitched in the majors himself, and it's kind of less of a big deal. But I think that's one thing that's interesting, and that's I get some feedback on that. But it's like a lot of these guys are on these strict pitch counts, and I think that was the thing with Killian, is that they're working on something, and that's what I think you got to take into account. It's like, all right, you're going to learn to throw this new curveball. Cool. Well, when you walk like 4 or 5 guys in an inning and you didn't even walk that many in the entire season, you got to look at that sometimes and be like, what the heck's going on here? So I think those things are important. But that's what'll be fun about spring training, right? You get to see that stuff again. You get to find out, hey, who are they going to have in this rotation? Who's possibly going to break camp with the club? What are these young relievers that they've got a bunch of in the minors who are ready to come up and actually pitch in Chicago? So a lot of cool stuff going on there.
Yeah, so that will be fun. And you mentioned, kind of the budget and who we might see added to the team. And, Jed Hoyer was kind of, on his, I don't know what you want to call it, the soapbox, but basically saying the same thing he's been saying, which, saying, hey, we're good. The obvious is we're going to spend money this winter. You have to spend money to field a Major League Baseball team because there's not enough Major League talent on the Chicago Cubs right now. And so, of course, he's going to spend money, but I feel like his latest comments, and it was the article that you wrote just yesterday or 2 days ago, is kind of leading us to the, hey, we're going to spend money because we have to, but we're going to spend it intelligently, which he's been saying it all along. But I kind of felt like this time around, he really was leaning more towards the intelligent fashion of spending money is going to be more of, we're not going to get any long-term big contracts. You're not going to see Carlos Correa. You're not going to see Corey Seager. And we were just talking about Corey Seager, and there are some pundits out there who think the Cubs are going to be in play on Seager. But I don't know. Do you get that from his latest comments, or do you feel like we've kind of turned a little bit? I know his prior comments, you were thinking that maybe, there was some room in there. But did you feel like maybe he was closing the door a little bit more in this latest comments?
Yeah. So, and I had mentioned that, yeah, because at the GM meetings, he did, and he talked about the inherent risk, and it seemed more as if he was presenting just a very basic pragmatic view of signing a big contract, right? You the longer the contract, the greater the risk, and you just have to know that going in. And so that kind of sounded like a guy who is entertaining the idea of perhaps kicking the tires on some of those big contracts, right? That's what it sounded like to me. And I think this time, he hit it a little harder. Free agency presents itself with a lot of opportunity to bring in talent. It also presents tremendous risk when you're talking about really long deals. And I'm quoting Hoyer now, by the way, for those who aren't. I'm reading this off the piece. It also presents tremendous risk when you're talking about really long deals, when you're talking about players on the wrong side of the aging curve. That's why free agency does present risk. Our goal is certainly to be competitive next year and to try to do everything we can to get into the tournament, which is kind of funny. But we do want to spend intelligently. And that's sort of that but we do. And that's where I think the difference is that he closed it with that, our goal is to be competitive, but, and that's where it goes into. So
don't expect much.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's, and I can't remember if I brought it up in that one or if it was a different one, that there is somewhere, there's a line in there that you cross at some point where you say, well, it could be intelligent to spend more money on, let's say, a pitcher, because that market seems to be pretty hot right now. And if you can jump that and lock somebody in prior to the lockout coming in on December 1st, that's not, you're not saving money, but that doesn't mean it's not intelligent, right? Because you want to make sure you have at least one piece in place for that. And I do think that makes some sense, but it certainly does sound like he's pouring a little bit of water. Although at the same time, here's what we got to understand. At the same time as somebody like John Heyman is going to be, putting out tweets, oh, there's 6 teams interested in. Yeah, no shit, John. Great. Where'd you hear that from? You know what I mean? Why?
He's a mouthpiece for the owners.
Exactly. Well, it's and for the age, I mean, basically half the time you can look at a Heyman tweet and it's like Scott Boras put it out there, or Steve Cohen or somebody. He is a mouthpiece of sorts at times, right? And those things are said for a reason. Now, at the same time, Hoyer would be smart to downplay it. Like if he comes out there and says, yes, we're absolutely entertaining a massive contract, which, he wouldn't say, but it's like, Oh, really? So now people know. So he is, to an extent, I think, trying to conceal motives, but I also think he's primarily being honest about it, and that makes sense, right? If do you want to lock yourself into that big a deal right now? Do you believe that Corey Seager is going to age well? You believe that Carlos Correa is? And for what it's worth, I mean, I still think Correa ends up in Detroit, but the Yankees are downplaying that too, though, right? The Yankees are sitting there saying, if it's the Yankees saying they don't want to, and Hal Steinbrenner is, voting for the lower cap and things like that. So there's just a lot of stuff that's out. There's a lot of smoke right now that I don't know it'll clear up within the next 2 weeks or not, but we'll see. And
I mean, it's hard to think it's going to. It's real hard, especially for the Cubs, at least. I mean, there may be some deals made. There will be, I would imagine, some deals done before December 1st. But
I want to address something here. I got to call this out. I'm sorry. The Jason Hayward. First of all, I also think it's important, if we're going to address and
should we spell correctly?
I think we need to know the players' names. That's just like, I'm not even trying to be a dick, but I do think it's important, if we're going to address these players and to have any credence in what we're saying, we need to have their names. But the Jason Hayward contract is on an entirely different planet from David Bodie and from Jake Arrieta. Jake Arrieta was
David Bodie signed what, a $5 million contract?
It's a little bit more than that because the options at the end, it's like $15 million, like 5 years, $15 million or whatever. But it's like $3 million this year, and I think it goes to like 6 and 7, like 5 or 6 or 7. Either way, that's like nothing, right? The total value of it is like what some people make in a year. Jake Arrieta was on a 1-year deal. There's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal, period. You know why? Because if that person sucks that year, who gives a shit? It's gone now. And that's money that you can go spend somewhere else. The Cubs weren't going to be very good. Like, okay, if you got somebody great instead of Arrieta, would that have made a difference? Like, maybe, but you still have to get all this stuff in and out of there and change those things around. But the David Bodie contract is, first of all, it's one of only 3 guaranteed deals they've got on the books right now. Jason Hayward's is like 3 times as much as the other 2 combined. So that's, we got to stop.
And this is going to be Hayward's last year, right?
One more after this.
Oh my God, it's a never-ending contract.
22-23.
Never-ending contract. Sorry.
Yeah. Atreyu.
Yeah.
Well,
so
Bastian is a Cubs beat writer, and he rides
there you go.
Whatever the
it's all coming together
thing he is. Anyway, that's a never-ending story reference. I'm sorry for those of you who are either too young or too old or never watched that movie back in the day.
We're gonna. My kids haven't seen it yet, and so that's the thing. They've seen every single modern show, so now they're watching things like Tom and Jerry, and we're gonna watch The Never-Ending Story, which is the reason we're talking about this is because Jason Hayward's contract is the never-ending contract that we wish would end, but it won't. So tough. So, anyways,
maybe he'll retire. I think we talk about this. Like, maybe he'll just, I doubt he will. But anyway, I'm sorry, I stepped on you again. Happening. That's usually what I do.
It's okay. That's okay. So the lockout, we're getting people to admit now that the lockout seems likely. That you've got Manfred coming out here. God, there's never a good leader when it comes to commissioner. But it's like after a while, there needs to be turnover, right? It's like congressmen and things. There needs to be term limits because it's like he's if you look at his comments from the last couple of days, he's talking about how he understands the view of the fans and he's got the fan perspective because of his background and how he left this big great job because he felt like he could bring peace to the labor negotiations process, as if he's like beating the drum for the players. Let's remember he works for the owners though. And so it's like, I just want to punch him in the face. I won't, but I have seen him once. I saw him at I went to the winter meetings after the Cubs won the World Series. Some people forget that. In 2016. And I actually walked into the restaurant that he was having lunch in, and he walked right by me. And I'm like, it's kind of weird when you walk past somebody that like a Michael Jordan or like I don't want to put the commissioner.
Yeah, I was going to say
Rob Manfred
that
up
you're
there,
going to get yelled at for doing that, but
that's
someone
what I'm
who,
here for.
yeah, someone with a great deal of fame who you've only ever seen on television or something
and a
like
lot,
that.
right?
Yeah. I would say I saw when I used to work for the Pacers, and like Michael Jordan walked past me one time, and he had an aura about him. You know what I mean? It was like, that's Michael Jordan. Or like stood next to Shaq. I saw the Big Show. That was an interest. It is the largest human being I've ever encountered in my life. Rick Smits, guys like that. It's kind of funny, but no, I think, and here's the issue, and here's something with Manfred. So you've had experience in corporate America, right?
Yeah.
You've had experience with corporate lawyers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there's something about, and I don't know, and it's probably a mix of things, right? A lot of times people talk about like Hollywood actors just being weird people. And I think there's a part of that you have to be kind of weird in order to gravitate toward that and get there. And then the environment itself makes you even weirder. So like be a corporate lawyer in a major law firm, you've got to have kind of a certain sort of personality to begin with. And then you get into that, and the job is kind of corporate climbing and moving up through the ranks and whatnot. That's how Rob Manfred came up, right? He's a lawyer. And I don't know, and I don't know if this has been your experience, but with mine, lawyers tend not to know anything about gray area. They tend to live and to breathe the black and the white, and these are the rules, and here's how we are interpreting them, without really a whole lot of human leeway, the best way I could put it, right? Where the rest of us are kind of like a little bit more go with the flow, a little bit more extemporaneous, if you will. And I think in that regard, like the stuff Manfred says, you're like, you're just out of touch. Do you understand how people think and act and do? And I just don't think he does.
He's like the dad of Major League Baseball, like the dad who's like so out of touch with everything. You don't even want to listen to him, but you have to because he's your dad.
Yeah. And not like what we were talking about earlier when I said my son doesn't listen to me, because my son, but this is more like when so my dad texts me, he's like, hey, what do you know about the Seager brothers? So it's like Corey and Kyle, and it's pretty good. And, gave him a breakdown. He's like, yeah, because I heard the Cubs are, have offered him or maybe signed him already. I'm like, no, Dad. Like, I run a whole ass website about this, man. You can just go on and read about it. Like, you're texting me about this. I'm like, no,
you're not breaking any news here.
Yeah, because I was like, well,
I learned that long ago.
Hear this from, but I think it's part of his, like, they live up close to Chicago. He'll listen to WGN radio and the Score and stuff like that. So I'm sure he or somebody, one of his buddies at their breakfast group probably said something or hurt, So it's literally a game of telephone with him texting me. But that's, again, being out of
casual
touch,
fans can say whatever they want. It's like kind of like it's like how people talk about like the election was rigged and all this stuff. It's like you just say whatever you want. Doesn't even have to be true. You don't have to have facts or anything.
Just say it and then just walk away from it. You know what I mean? It's just like you let the landmine out there and just set it. It's like, here's a burning pile of dog shit. I'm just gonna light it on fire, set it on your porch, and I'm just gonna walk away and watch what happens. Except in a lot of cases, I don't even think they watch what happens, so it's not even that funny. But yeah, I mean, I think it's that, but also like, I don't know if Manfred believes what he says, but I think there's a measure of he believes that if he says it, other people will believe it, and by manifesting it into the world, he's essentially making it true. And again, here's what lawyers love to do, right? They can make the language say what they want it to say. So yes, by all accounts, a lockout can't necessarily help negotiations, but I do understand that. I don't want to say it's necessary, but you don't want teams really, once that CBA expires, you don't really want people, nor do teams really want to be operating outside of the realm of an agreed upon collective bargaining agreement, right? Like, they don't, what happens? You don't have any rules in place. So now do you retroact those? How do you handle that stuff? So I understand the purpose of a lockout. I don't like it, but it is better than a strike, because at least then the season hasn't started yet, but at the same time, I do think it's it is just going to be tough because it's just not viewed. It's viewed as an act of aggression on the part of the owners and the league, versus kind of a procedural move. So I get it. And just to address there's no way in hell Scott Boras could, should, or would be the head of the players union. That definitely should not happen, mostly because he actually has very, very direct interest in a handful of those players.
Yes,
and cannot be counted upon to act in the interest of the league in general.
Of interest.
The players union in general, because there is no way on God's green earth that the remaining agents that are out there would ever let Scott Boras negotiate on behalf of their own clients. That's just not going to work. But anyway.
And so just so everybody knows, I'm sure everybody does know, but just in case you don't, lockout means basically no player moves, right? And so essentially, if the owners wanted to, I suppose they could kind of extend the current CBA agreement to run, until they come to an agreement. They're choosing not to do that. They're choosing to lock out the players. And essentially what it does is does it really hurt anybody? It's hard to say. I mean, it makes it so there's obviously no free agents, no trades, no arbitration. The Rule 5 draft doesn't happen. All those things are going to happen, though.
And players can't use facilities. I think that's the big thing is those, at least on major league contracts. Now, the minor leagues are not beholden to the CBA.
Yeah.
So again, there's that. But like those major league players, like when you hear about once you get into February and you start seeing guys report early, like that can't happen. So what is a figurative lockout then becomes a literal lockout. Also because they're not getting paid. Right. That's the other thing is there's no bonuses that are going to get paid to anybody. There's no, if that lockout continues into the season, which would be the same thing as a strike at that point, right? There's no paychecks being cut. There's none of that going on. No negotiations. The general manager, like team employees, cannot have contact with players. There's nothing like that goes on. So, it could be a very interesting situation once that starts to drag on. But the idea there is that, hey, we're going to suspend everything. There will be no transactions. So then, and I hate that I don't want to side with the owners. That's not what I mean to do here. But I understand it from a procedural standpoint because you don't want moves being made in the absence of a new CBA. Heck, we saw that the NFL a few years ago had an uncapped year because they couldn't come to an agreement for a while. So like people could just go out and sign these. But the thing is, then you get bitten in the ass by that because in the next year there is a cap again. I'm not saying that would happen in the majors because there is no cap right now anyway, but that's what you don't want is moves to be made outside the bounds of a CBA and then have something come in and be like, oh shit. Well, now what do we do? We got to make these changes. So anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so, the biggest sticking points at the end of the day, you can go out there and read whatever you want to read, but at the end of the day, it's all about the money, right? The player salaries have actually gone down over the last several years. The values of these organizations have shot through the roof. The owners are making a tremendous amount of money in a highly unregulated business because they enjoy an antitrust exemption. There is and there never will be competition to Major League Baseball unless it's in another country. But there will not be competition in this country to Major League Baseball. It's why you don't see, other leagues popping up like you do in football. Not that the other leagues in football are ever successful,
which is wild because there's not even enough talent here. I don't want to go too far afield here, but there's 32 teams in the NFL, and there was some bullshit going around the other day about they're talking about trying to expand to 40. There's not 32 men on the planet capable of being an NFL quarterback, a successful high-level NFL quarterback. You're telling me you want to go to 40? I don't know if anybody else out there watching.
That'd be so ugly.
Dude, the games last week were some of the sloppiest, worst football. Last night's game sucked ass. It is awful. And you're telling me you want to add 8 more teams to that? And the USFL is going to start up again. Like, at least that's okay because now, and here's my thing with it, is if you're going to have a separate league or whatever, at least then what you're dealing with is a collection of players who are on a fairly level, no pun intended, or actually, I guess pun intended, a level playing field. They're guys who aren't in the NFL right now, right? And so it's at least level. But if you took a group like that of the USFL and had them play against an NFL team, they'd get crushed. Like everybody's talking, oh, Alabama could probably be. No, because folks,
No.
the difference physically, and so okay, so go back to baseball again. There's 30 teams in Major League Baseball, and a lot of them suck ass. So you're trying to, where are you going to find? Yeah, you could find a lot of players out there, a lot of guys who could play independent ball, and some of those guys could end up being pretty decent. They could make it up and maybe be a roster guy. But if you try to expand, I mean, baseball is such a difficult sport. I mean, here we are talking about a guy like Nelson Velaquez who strikes out 30% of the time, but is very much a viable, that would have been unheard of, at least as a regular occurrence, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But there's not enough players on the planet to expand or to create a new competing league anyway. And the owners know that. So where, what are they going to do? They're like, you can't beat us. We're making billions of dollars off of, everybody's talking about like attendance is down, but you know why attendance is down? Part of the reason is because guess what? I could sit my fat happy ass on my couch with a 70-inch television in full HD and watch that game. I don't have to deal with parking. I don't have to drive there. I don't have to do anything. It's fun to be in the ballpark. I don't want to, but NFL in particular, shit, dude. I'm watching NFL on TV all day before I go to a game,
I agree.
to be honest. But anyway, that was a tangent, but I do think it speaks to a bunch of different things because these owners are fat and happy. The TV contracts continue to go up. They're making these massive deals from Turner and Fox, most of which are predicated on the postseason anyway, and they're figuring out ways and they're building their stadiums and getting public money to do it and putting the suites in there and getting tons of money from corporate entities. So they don't really give a shit in a lot of cases if the fans aren't there in the 400 level or the 500 level or whatever, because you got a bunch of dudes who are sitting down there in the 1914 club that aren't even out there to watch the game, but damn it, they already paid their $300 a seat. So who gives a shit?
Yeah, they're bringing their clients to the ballpark that they can brag that they went to the 1914 club and they're at a game at Wrigley and they get a post on their social media accounts that, they're living the fancy life. I mean, that's what the Cubs are banking on. And that's what a lot of other teams bank on as well. So you can't feel bad for the owners. But the thing is at the end of the day, that's what the CBA negotiations are all about. It's about money. They'll say they'll try to change the topic and make it seem like it's about, trying to help somebody or trying to do some good by somebody else. But at the end of the day, it's just about money. The owners want more of the money. The players want more of the money. The weird thing about baseball is you think about it, like if I invent a widget, I can sell that widget for as much or as little as I want to, and I make a profit margin off of that. I'm expected to make as much profit as possible. The thing is that the product on field for Major League Baseball and other sports, the product are people that get paid salaries. They're not a widget. And so that's where it's kind of like this thinking from the owners feels like they want to treat the players like they're widgets. And they want to make as big a profit as they possibly can be. But without that product, without those people out there on the field playing and doing the things that they do, they really don't have anything. They literally have nothing except ballparks that, as you mentioned, are funded by the public, by us, by me and you.
Right. And only some of which, Wrigley can get by on it, but then, again, that's two-sided, right? Like a few people will show up, right, to do tours there or whatever. But if you don't have players to populate the field, you do not have any reason for people to pay all that money. Speaking of which, it's funny because I have a group DM over on Twitter where a couple people, like somebody who lives all the way across the country and by no means was ever actually going to buy season tickets, but came up in the season ticket holder wait list, despite being like 30,000th in line. Right?
Oh, really?
And jumped up. Yeah. And that's what
hallelujah. It's a miracle.
Right. And I've been saying this for years that the number on there is a complete scam. Like, and now part of it is because a lot of people, myself included back in the day, would be on the season ticket holder waiting list. Maybe you really thought like I'll get in this. And by the time I make it up there, I got on there when I was like 21 years old. I couldn't afford season tickets. But I thought, well, by the time I make it up from 36,000, I'll get there. And I would move 100 spots or whatever every once in a while. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm like 25,000, and I get the call. I'm like, what the fuck happened to the other 24,999 people?
Dude, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for
Right,
the season ticket holders.
But they definitely are. Again, I mean, you and I experienced this. Was that last year? Was it? It was at the end of 2019, right? Because we gave them up before 2020. Where they extended the deadline, like gave 6 or 8 extra weeks to pay the deposit, and they're doing the same thing again this year. So here's the thing: if you really had, and again, I do understand that there is a desire to cater to those folks who have already been season ticket holders, right? You want to maintain that. You don't want to just. But if you really had 36,000 people waiting in line, would you really be that concerned? If you knew you just had somebody waiting right behind, would you be like, "Hey, man, give me 8 more. We'll give you 8 more weeks. We'll let you spread it out over a couple more." No, you'd be like, "All right, well, sorry, it's great to have your business. On to the next. Let's go."
Yes,
but
exactly.
That's not
it's
what
like
it is.
When you pull the ticket in the bakery, like if they don't answer, they don't sit there and wait for 5 minutes. They call the next number.
Right. And guess what? And if you're number 3 and you missed it and they go to 4, like, sorry, 3's done. You got to come in and draw another ticket. And they do that with the wait list. You got to get back on it. But it's funny to me because I've seen some posts that like, hey, I hate doing this, but I'm giving up my tickets. Like the product is just not worth the price anymore. And I mean, that's where we were at when we made that choice. And that was, partially a business decision because you can't resell them very easily, but it's just when you start to break down the price and the cost and everything else, if you're not going to every game or you don't have a group that splits them, you don't live immediately in the area, it is really, really difficult to look at that and say, well, gee, I love the team and I'll continue to support them with my, I'll basically just use this as my, it's like your tithe at church or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm just going to pay this money to my Lord and Savior Tom Ricketts so that he can keep operating the team.
Hallelujah.
Like, praise the Lord, pass the ammunition. But it is I can't even imagine though what it's like for other teams that don't have as much of that connection, that don't have Wrigley, right? That don't have the generations
like
worth.
The Angels, for example.
Yeah. Like how does that work? Tickets went okay. Who gives a shit? Like are there enough?
Probably haven't raised ticket prices in 40 years in Los Angeles.
Although, hey, at least they're trying to be exciting, man. They're going out and signing Syndergaard, and I think
what was that? Let's talk about that for a minute. So Syndergaard got offered a QO at $18.4 million. What do the Angels do? They go and they eat the penalties and they sign him for $21 million. Like that. I mean, I guess it's good for Syndergaard because he got a couple more $1 million and he's out of New York.
He's out of the Mets. Yeah.
But at the end, what are the Angels thinking? Like, what do they get there?
I look at a couple different things, right? Because here's the other thing. So they QO'd Raisel Iglesias, who turned him down. And so they will get back a pick after comp balance round B, which is between the second and third rounds, right? So they lose their second round pick, which was, I think they were picking like 13th or something like that. They get a pick after comp round B. So certainly not equivalent, right? But you figure instead of losing a pick entirely, and this is kind of what, remember I've talked about this with, like, if the Cubs were to make some trades, pick up prospects, you could see losing. So if they're looking at it like that, they're saying, well, by the time you get outside of the top 5, top 10, that's when you introduce a lot more risk into the mix of a draft pick anyway. And so really moving from mid second round to pre third round, not a giant loss. And if you lose $500K in international, you could trade for international free agency money, so they could make that up if they want. They haven't really done well in that market anyway, so they might be looking at it like, shit, man, our international scouting sucks. It doesn't really matter. And then you're saying, well, hey, we really need to ride the wave. We've got, between Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani now, they've got like 54 MVPs, right? Like they've got potentially the 2 best players on the planet. Right, if you look at it that way, Ohtani's the most dynamic, and I will still as I bring it up every time, I want to go back. I should have kept receipts and just printed them all off, screen capped them all, of every person, and I will call you an idiot, and I don't mean that in a mean way. But you were an idiot if you told me, which did happen a lot because I wrote about him a lot because there was nothing else going on, very interesting at the time, that he wasn't going to be worth it, that he was just another Fukudomi, which is, kind of tinged with racism a little bit, but I'll set that aside. Shohei, like what he just did this past season is unlike anything we have seen. And you could say Babe Ruth, but Babe Ruth never did anything like this. He wasn't that. He wasn't like one of the best pitchers. Anyway, it's incredible. So I think what they're doing is saying, hey, we got to win. Like we've got these dudes here. We're going to go heavy after some better pitching. We're going to load this up and come on out here and let's go. Now, is it a little bit weird to do that for a guy who threw one inning last year? Yeah, maybe. But I think they're pretty convinced that he can come in there and be a dude for them.
But why not throw some options in the deal or something? I mean,
I don't think he wanted a
1-year contract.
I think I think he wants to try to parlay that into something bigger. Yeah. I mean, that's, but and we saw that, Verlander got $25 million. Now, and somebody was like, how is he worth that? And I'm like, well, part of it's because he stayed with the Astros, so they don't have to pay any penalties. And it was, he's going to be 39. I'm like, yeah, but he also was on the team the whole time. Like they knew what his injury was. They knew what the surgery was. Obviously, I mean, everybody does, but they were there for his rehab. They've seen all that. They're familiar with him. And, they're not going to be paying Carlos Correa. So we'll see how that shakes out. But it's very interesting to me to see two dudes who threw a combined, one inning or whatever, and to get $46 million worth of contracts, in spite of the qualifying offer. But Eduardo Rodriguez, another one. What do you get? 5 years, $77 million, 80 total if you add in the potential incentives. And that was a qualifying offer, which signals to me again the Tigers, I think, are going to get after it. I think they're getting Correa. They already made the Barnhart trade. They might extend Barnhart. They're going to be an interesting one to watch. I think the Tigers are that team that, of course, we saw with the Padres how that worked out. But anyway, it's fun to see that because the Tigers have been such dog shit for the last several years.
Yeah.
So
I think when you look at the AL Central, it's I guess you got the White Sox dominated it, right? But
you could easily at worst finish second in that division without even trying that hard. I mean, if are the Twins going to be any good? Probably not. The Royals aren't going to be any good. So hey, the Guardians,
the NL Central, to be honest,
the Guardians got shit falling off their stadium already. The new logo, like the G logo, like fell off the outside the team store.
That should be a sign.
Yeah.
It was a sign.
Yeah, it literally was. But yeah, you can get after it. But that's weird. I don't know if this rings familiar to you, but a team going for it in a central division that isn't actually that strong, that has some teams at the bottom that are actually jettisoning players, getting worse. Are you telling me that you think spending a little bit of money to become more competitive is a good thing in a weak central division?
Yeah, I mean, look at what the Braves did last year. One game better than the Cubs at the trade deadline.
Half game. Well, at the All-Star break anyway. I don't know what they were at the deadline. They were half game different when they traded for Peterson.
And at the end of the day, they end up winning the World Series. The probably had the worst odds of any team in the playoffs.
In the tournament, as Jed Hoyer refers to it.
in a tourney. So
in October.
So yeah, I mean, like that, and that's what Hoyer's trying to point out, right? You can pick and choose like the right things to say. Is like, hey, well, look at what Atlanta did. That's all we need to do is just get to the tournament. Of course, the Cubs got to the tournament for several years in a row and couldn't do squat. So it's not just about getting to the tournament, but okay, we get what you're saying.
It's also
that's step one.
Yeah, and he didn't. What I would have loved, like what I wouldn't have given for him to have been like, not only the Braves, but when we traded Jock Peters to the Braves, we were tied with the Cardinals and only a half game behind the Braves overall. The Cubs and Cardinals were both 44 and 46. Like, and I get it, right? I'm not saying, yes, they still would have lost some players and they wouldn't have gotten the prospects back. So I understand that. But the idea is that the Cardinals went out. I mean, they signed like 4 or 5 50-year-old pitchers. I mean, what they got? Waino was already there, and they went out and got Lester and Jay Happ. Waino is actually still older than both of those guys and is still making a crap ton of money and pitched really well. But they went out and picked guys up, and they went on that tremendous run and made the tournament, if you will. The Braves looked like
Are we just
they
going to call it
kind of
that from
struggled for
now
a little
on?
bit, and then they all of a sudden got after it, and they went on. And look what they did. Look at the Nationals are a little bit different from a couple years ago, because after they started out, they were like 6-24 or whatever, and then from that point they were the best team in baseball and went on a run. But because of that slow start, they still weren't necessarily viewed, even though they were actually the hottest team in baseball. If you exclude the first month of the season, they were the best team. But that there again, it's a matter of getting in. And I think if I look at the Cubs and you look at the value, I mean, shit, go back to 2018, right? When they stumbled down the stretch, they lost game 163. That is the difference between being a division winner and being able to host a series and being the wild card and having to play the Rockies and get beat because you suck and can't score any runs, right? Look at the 3-game opening, getting shut out by the flipping Marlins, and last year in the most boring play. Like, I almost fell asleep. I was at that elimination game on a rooftop, and I almost fell asleep. Like, it was so pathetically boring. But you look at that and say, well, let's just say 2, because they could have won a game in there, but you scored 2 more runs, 2 in 2018, and we could be honestly in a vastly different. What if they had hosted a division series and won that series and to go to the NLCS again in 2018? I think we look at a vastly different trajectory of the 3 subsequent years, vastly different from 2 runs. And I think that to me is more than the whole just get in, because that's such a trope, and I understand it, but you see that in every sport. To me, it's like, if you just, it could be the smallest incremental change, and maybe that's what Jock Peterson was for the Braves. Part of that was his performance, but like, how many headlines did that dude make for his bleached hair and his pearl necklaces, and he's giving necklaces out to people, and they're wearing, like, that was in the parlance of our day, that was a vibe.
Well, and you think about what he's really doing with that approach is he's the center of attention. He's not the best baseball player on the team, but what he is doing by being the center of attention is he's taking pressure off of everybody else.
Yep.
And he's not doing it because of his performance. He's just doing it because people like to talk about him.
Right. And it's not quantifiable, but it is absolutely legitimate. And you have everybody in the fan, despite their stupid tomahawk chop bullshit. But outside of that, there was just so much of a good, like, everybody's pulling in the same direction with something like that. Everybody's having fun with that and buying the fake pearl necklaces and throwing them out at the parade. Like, there's little things like that make a difference. And again, I'm not trying to indicate that had the Cubs gone out and made one trade or whatever, that the same thing would have been there for Peterson and he would have driven them to a title. But those little things like that can make a tremendous difference, or one move, or, again, you get a game to break the right way here or there, and that can really alter the trajectory of where you're going. So when Hoyer says those things, like, I get it. And it's absolutely true. From we saw it, we very literally saw it happen for the Cubs. That 2 teams, ostensibly there's a 3-team tie, the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Braves. They're all, 44 and 46, 44 and 45, right? That's indiscernible. And 2 of those teams made the postseason. 1 won the World Series, and 1 traded everyone away and finished 20 games under 500 and is now trying to figure out what the hell they're doing. So
dumpster fire.
Yeah. And so it's, and can you turn that around quickly? Yeah, it's not the NFL, but you're going to have to spend money to do it. And you got to have players, because you don't have a lot of those guys anymore. And I guess, hey, folks, if you believe Patrick Wisdom and Frank Schwindel are going to do the same shit across a whole season as what we saw them do, or maybe better, hey, more power to you, man.
They're not the cornerstones. They are not the cornerstones of the championship.
They're both 30 years old. Like, that's not going to be, even if they're great next year.
That was the only thing we had to talk about last season. That's it, people. I mean, put them on a team with Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and Javi Baez, and they're not even part of the conversation.
Or God forbid, if you'd had players like that who are really strong supporting role players around those key players in the first place, well, gee, maybe that would have been better.
Well, but wait, weren't they in the Cubs system?
They were, oddly enough, and I know, and I understand
Seems like bad
the reason
decision
for that.
making.
But I mean, it goes back to the only players they put around those core guys that they've added ever since Zobrist left were Daniel Descalso and Steven
Stop. I
Souza
don't want to ever
Jr.
hear you say
and
his
all
name
that.
again.
No, I'm
I
going to bring it
challenge
up.
you.
I
challenge you.
No, because that's what they did. But all these people are like, well, the core failed, and that's why they're going.
We should have a drinking game where every time Evan says Daniel Descalso, you have to slam a shot.
How many? What do you have to do every time I bring up that he's the only player since Jason Hayward to be given a multi-year contract as a position player? But the issue is that they just never properly built around those guys because you knew, hey, and it's funny because like everybody still thinks Bryant strikes out like 30% of the time. They saw what he did as a rookie, and here we are 6 years later, and people are still thinking he strikes out too much. But you've got Javi Baez, you've got Anthony, you know these guys, you know who these are as hitters, you know that. So go out and find players to complement them, but they didn't. And they didn't.
And I mean, it's that. Listen, Frank Schwindel and Patrick Wisdom aren't complementary pieces to these guys because their strikeout rates are through the roof too.
Just unintelligible noises. Sorry,
that's what we are, anyways.
Yeah, for the most part, I feel sorry for the people who are listening to this later. I feel sorry for the ones watching it now, but at least you kind of see it. The ones who are listeners, like, what the fuck is he doing?
What are these people doing? This is ugly. This is ugly stuff.
But whatever they do, I sincerely hope that when Jed talks about spending intelligently, that they really do that. I mean, is that Kevin Gossman, and you go out, and you actually though continue to build the pitching around that? I mean, if they don't come in, like, I do not want to see a whole collection of old ass bullpen arms. I
think, like you said, I think it's 1 year deals. I think that's all we're going to see. I'm going to be very surprised if there's anything like, I mean, if there's a multi-year deal, it's going to be 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, they need a position player. They need to go spend on a position player. And here's my issue though, is my bigger issue than Frank Schwindel and Patrick Wisdom, because those guys, the Cubs know they're finite in terms of like more finite than usual. They're very short term. But if they go into the season with Nico Horner as the starting shortstop and Nicky Two Strikes there at second base, like if they have absolutely no power up the middle of the field whatsoever and incredibly questionable defense, all things considered, at short, not just after seeing Javi Baez for the last several years, but knowing the kind of shortstop market that is out there, and I'm not even talking Seager and Correa necessarily, or Story or a Javi return, but if you do that, and then you're going, you are, to me, that's a whole lot of eggs in a basket made out of wet toilet paper that I feel like it's got a whole hell of a lot of chance of just falling through, and I do not like it one bit. But
if they're looking towards the future, they've got plenty of shortstops in the system, and so if you're looking at next year as kind of an unknown transition year, expect the Cubs to come around third place. If they finish any less than third, it'd really be disappointing. And then look to spend the next year. Now I don't know who the free agents are going to be next year, but I think that's where it feels like we're going, where you can kind of expect the Cubs to I don't think they really know what they have in the minors. I think they know what they think they have, but I don't think that they or anybody else really truly knows what they have, especially after all the trades that they made at the trade deadline. So maybe it's just a little bit time to marinate this next season, not do anything stupid that's going to cost you, in case, you are where you think you're going to be at the end of 2022, which is really then diving in to be able to like secure the core for the future, right?
I'm just saying, give me Corey and Kyle Seager and then fill in the rest.
Okay.
Done.
There you go.
Because then by the time Kyle's old, he can platoon with Wisdom over there and do some of that stuff. And then by the time that's all done, Corey's not going to be playing short anymore. You move him over to third. And you move up, it's Ed Howard or Kevin Mate or whoever you want to have playing shortstop, and you move those guys in there. Because I just don't, at this point, I don't give a shit about listening to logic or whatever. I want the Cubs to go out and be the big swinging dick of the major market Apologies for that visual if that just got put. But I want them to do what they're supposed to do, which is to spend big money that they've got room to do.
Go to your home.
Yeah, and to make this stuff happen.
Home.
So we'll see. I don't think it will happen. I don't think it will. But I would like to see that because you can build around, because then you do have some of those young guys coming up, and you do have young pitchers coming up, which hasn't happened in a long time, which is, again, for the 50 millionth time, the biggest problem with what happened the last time around. They never developed any pitching. They had no one who they could have brought up that came up through the system to replace guys who they were having to pay a ton of money to, like Yu Darvish and John Lester. You know, when you're looking at $330-some million in contracts that there was no way to replace. I mean, when it
they did. They traded Dylan Cease to the Chicago White Sox.
Right. Well, and then they, had to go sign freaking Jake Arrieta. Right. Like,
so glad that's over.
Yeah. God, no shit.
I mean, I appreciate what he did. Let's not get back into that. Let's not get into that.
But yeah, I just, if they're able to actually get another pipeline of players and more consistent, instead of, calling up 4 dudes in 1 year and then be like, oh shit, look what our minors did. Okay. But yeah, what happened after that? You had 4 dudes you called up in 2015, and then Hap later, or 3 dudes, and then Hap, and then it was like, well, so much for the minors, I guess it was because Almora came up then too, but it's like you had all your draft picks for like 5 years in a row were all up with the team at the same time, but that was
they won your World Series.
That was all it, but they were all first rounders. There was nobody beyond that, nothing from a position player or pitcher standpoint that they did from a development.
There was no development. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you fix that, you can afford to pay somebody $30 million because you're having dudes coming up making $600,000 and like 8 of them. That's weird. That's weird. But that's my thing. When everybody's like, you can't pay all this money to Dodgers are paying Mookie Betts a hell of a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like the Padres are paying Tatis a hell of a lot of money. They're debate on whether that's any value or not. But
there's no doubt that with the new guys, the new GM, the new assistant GM, Jed Hoyer, everybody in place, those things should happen. We'll see if they happen over the next 2 to 3 years. Today is the deadline for the 40-man roster, and that is. I don't know what time it is, but the 40-man roster needs to be set today for the Rule 5 draft to be able to protect players from the Rule 5 draft, I should say. And so that news is going to be coming down. So be sure to check in at Cubs Insider for that, because we'll have that news as soon as it comes down. I think, what do we have, like 38 right now, 37 on the 40-man?
Oh, it's less than that. I think it's down to like 33 or 34 because of the last.
Oh, is it really? Wow. Okay.
It got dropped down because there were a couple other guys who, or maybe was it back up to 30? Was it 36? I don't even know, because they made some moves, and it's funny because like there's deadlines for that stuff, and then but it's not like there's one date where they all just like boop and they actually list them. They get strung out over a few days. Because I think it was, or maybe it's 36. It was down to 33, and then 3 more guys got activated off the 60 days, so maybe it's 36.
Yeah,
but there's obviously going to have to be some other moves, because even if they add a few guys, they're still going to go out there and make trades or sign players. And if you have 36 or 37 guys on the 40-man roster, that doesn't leave you a whole lot of room to add. So I am interested to see. It's going to be Velasquez for sure. I'd like to see Ethan Roberts added. But yeah, I think there's potential for maybe 2 to 3. 1 for sure, and then maybe 2 to 3 others. But I guess we'll find out soon enough this afternoon.
Yep. So we'll circle back. We'll try to circle back next week. I'm traveling next week, so if we could do Monday, we'll see if anything develops over the weekend. If not, we may go a week without the show. So we'll see.
It'll be more than a week, because I'm gonna go ahead and tell you I ain't doing shit over Thanksgiving.
Well, that's what I mean. It's a week.
Oh yeah, a whole week. Not a week between shows, but a week.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. Like, it won't be, if there's not a show next week, like Monday through Friday, there probably won't be a show until the following week, Monday through Friday. Because we don't do this on the weekends. We don't get paid that much.
Yeah, we don't get paid enough to do it when we do.
True.
It's set up to drop the GoFundMe in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we drop the GoFundMe. But we don't have that. So just go to cubsinsider.com. Anyways, everyone have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves this first weekend before the holiday season explodes on all of us. So you go enjoy yourselves.
See you, everybody.
Peace.